Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. So I finished reading A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sara Maas a few days ago. Not yesterday, but the day before yesterday. So today is the 20th, so the 20th, I believe. And I had to sit on it for a couple days before I did my review, mostly because I've been super busy editing and writing and I had no time, but I managed to get everything done tonight, so I have time for this. So I'm excited to give my official review for A Court of Thorns and Roses. So I kind of finally decided to jump on the bandwagon and see what all the fuss was about. This is like a new thing that's big, and maybe it's like kind of had its time. I don't know. Some people I've heard on YouTube are tired of fae romances, and she kind of started the trend with them, kind of like how Stephanie Meyer started the trend with vampire romances. But I love it because I just now jumped on the bandwagon. I just got so excited about it because it got me into reading again. You guys probably know this by now, but I edit professionally and I write the books that I want to read. So I either read my books or I edit and read the books that I'm editing for my clients. So it's all kind of work. So I don't really read for fun. I don't read other authors' books for fun. And yet Sara Maas managed to pull me into the book and get me into it right from the first page. So the opening sequence reminded me a lot of Hunter. It had a lot of vibes about like her going out and hunting and surviving and helping her family survive, and just the vibe was very Hunter-like, which maybe reminded me of one of my books, so I thought that was kind of cool. And it immediately hooked me in because one thing that I did like, one of the positives about this was her descriptions are so visceral and real that I got so immersed into the story that I just couldn't stop reading. And as an author, I'm sure other authors can relate that when we read books, we kind of like to analyze and learn and figure out what their style is and how we can use that to improve our styles and stuff. And so one of the things that I observed was how descriptive she is with she didn't add like paragraphs and paragraphs to the description. A lot of times it was just one extra word that I wouldn't have thought of that she added to the sentence that made it pop and just drew me into the story. The main character, was so relatable. Like, I actually really loved her. Normally I don't like tough chicks that are strong, and she's kind of hardened because of everything that she's gone through, but I immediately felt sympathy for her because of her dad and her sisters, the way that they treated her, and I immediately just got caught up with it. It has a Beauty and the Beast kind of parallel to it, so I fell in love with that concept, but I feel like she added enough twists to it that it was like different and unique, and she made it her own. With that in mind, the other positive that I liked about this book was the twist in it, because there's something going on and the main character doesn't get the whole story, and she gets hints and bits and pieces, and so sometimes she overhears dialogue between some characters and she's trying to figure out what they mean, and as the reader you're trying to figure out what they mean, and you don't get answers until the end of the book. And then when you get the answers, there's this one part that really hit when you get the answers and you're like, aha, there's still some stuff that's been hidden behind that does not get revealed to you until some more twist later on. There was this one moment when this one character comes in to the dining hall and is being evil, and I got so many feels, but then the situation just kind of snowballs from there, and you get this part in the book where you won't be able to stop reading until you hit the end, and I kept speed reading through it and I couldn't stop. So those are the positives. I loved it. I love the character. The other positive was the relationship between Tamlin and the main girl. It's a very slow burn romance, and I don't know if I've read any slow burn romances that were this slow, because I was like, are they even gonna fall in love? Like, really? How does this work? But it does, and when they do finally start having shit moments and stuff, oh my gosh, their relationship is so good. So couple of the negatives of this. The first one obviously is that it has spicy scenes, which may be a positive for some people, but I don't really like spicy scenes. I don't like steamy scenes. I don't like erotic stuff. No sex scenes for me. But the spicy scenes in this book, I feel like, yes, they were in there, so that was kind of a negative thing. But hear me out. Most erotica and sex scenes that I have seen, because I have had to edit a few for my job, which I'm not happy about, but it's my job. Most of those scenes are in there just to be those scenes, and there's no purpose. Sometimes the characters aren't even in love. There's no real connection between them. There's no emotional connection between them. But I felt like the big spicy scene in this book had a reason, it had a purpose, it was part of the plot line, and it had relevance, and I appreciated that it had meaning, because a lot of authors these days are just throwing in those spicy sex scenes right and left without even a thought. And so for me, it was super refreshing to at least, even if it, because if you're gonna have to have it in there, at least make it have meaning to the characters, at least make it important to the plot, at least give the characters a genuine emotional connection first. Don't just have them do it just because they look at each other and they decide that they're attractive to each other. So that was a negative thing, but it was done in a positive way. So if you like, it was the best of a bad circumstance, I guess, if you want to call it that. Like, I don't like that it was in there, but it was in there like, it worked in the story, is what I'm trying to say very badly. So the other negative thing that I found was, I don't know if other editors do this, but I can't stop editing. So I can't really, it's really hard to get me immersed into a story so much that I shut my editing brain off, which there were parts in here where my editing brain shut off and I was able to just enjoy it. But I did see some things that if it was me and if I had been hired to edit this, I would have changed it. Now, keep in mind that in Sara J. Maas's defense, she is famous. She can get by with this. Indie authors like me and most of my viewers here on this channel and a lot of my friends cannot get by with the mistakes that she made in this book. There are no technical grammatical errors and there are no typos. There are no punctuation errors, but there are some fragments. She uses fragments a lot, and I think it's her style because it's like a dramatic thing, but it's technically not written correctly. The other thing was that her writing was not as tight as it could be because she uses a lot of like was, like there was, or this was that, or this was that, and especially sometimes in her descriptions there would be like a this was like this and this was like that. And as an, like, I've recently learned from some editors that I've worked with that you can make your writing tighter by just describing what the thing is and leaving out the there was, or leaving out the was and replacing was with a stronger verb. Like, instead of was, use a verb that fits in place. Now, there are times that you cannot do that. Like, you have to say, like, there are some instances where there's no other way around it and you will have to use the word was. That's fine. But she used it a lot more often than I was expecting, and so her writing was just not as tight as it could be. And so there were a few times that it was like meant to be a dramatic last line, and I just, for the life of me, could not stop at the looking and glaring at what I would have changed and considered an editing mistake. And as I said, she's famous, she can get by with it. I can't, a lot of my friends can, a lot of my clients can't, and a lot of the people that are probably watching this video can't. So that was just something to note. So the spicy scene and the editing stuff was the only mistakes that really, the only negative things of this book. Everything else was positive. So another positive that I just thought about was the fact that her ideas were super creative. Usually, another reason why it's hard for me to read is because I write the books that I want to read. I'm not a great author. I don't consider myself a good one. And so I'm not bragging, but I'm just like, I know myself best. So like, I can write a story exactly as I want it to be done. And so a lot of times when I'm reading a book, I'll just get turned off because I'll be like, oh man, I would have done this idea, or why didn't they do it this way? And that really honestly turns me away from a lot of books. But in this case, the things that she does, the ideas that she had, the way that she treated her characters, the dramaticness between everybody and the intense, like what the characters go through, exactly what I would have done. And so for that reason, that was another reason why I got hooked, was because I didn't get turned away from it, because this author did exactly what I would have done to my characters. Because some people are just, they don't get gritty enough in a clean way, and I feel like that's the other thing about this book, was I feel like it was gritty enough for me, but it was done in a cleanish way, minus the spicy scene. It does get a little violent and graphic, but like not in a big way, and it didn't really bother me. There are some scary looking fae, so they're described in kind of freaky, like monstrous ways, but that didn't bother me either. It feels very much like Cassandra Clare's and how she describes the monsters in her series, if you're familiar with that one. But I don't consider that bad, and I don't consider that unclean or like, you know, not good or whatever. So the other positive was the world building. So I know I've heard a lot of people say that they're sick and tired of fae, they're sick and tired of courts, they're sick and tired of fae romances. It's been overdone and overdone and overdone by now because Sarah J. Maas started the trend and then everybody else kind of jumped on the bandwagon. But I'm just now getting to this, so I have to enjoy, and I've planned to enjoy, the world building and the creativity behind it because it took a spin on a classic race as fae, and so they're not just people that are running around in the woods. They have really complicated politics. The world is divided by courts, which provides kind of a lot of politics going on between the courts, between specific courts in this story, and it's just really creative, and I love it. I love it so much. There's a map of the world, Pyrithian, if I'm pronouncing that right. And to be honest, you can't really go wrong with it. And I don't see why it's a bad thing that people kind of jumped on the bandwagon and did a lot of court books, so to speak, where the world is divided by courts. Now, if those courts are fake courts, that's a little close to her stuff. But I plan to do it, and I'm really excited. And there's just like, there's all kind, like the movie or the TV show Rain does that, and it's like, but it's historical, so it's historical France from the 1500s, I believe. So it's got that same kind of feeling, and it's just like Game of Thrones does it in the fantasy world Westeros. So political intrigue is super addictive, and it's super creative, and it allows you to do a lot of ideas that are super interesting and intriguing to the plot. So that's also another positive thing. So I loved the world. I loved the characters. I loved the ideas. I loved the descriptions. I loved the plot itself and the ideas. I loved the twists. And the only two negative things I had were her writing style sometimes wasn't as tight as it could have been. Wasn't kind of edited that perfect. And then the spicy stuff, which at least was done in a decent way. So overall, I'm still giving this book 5 stars just because the 2 mistakes were not enough to dock a star, in my opinion. So I loved the story, and the fact is that it got me into reading for fun again. The last book I read was back in September, and it was Star Wars Brotherhood, and the only reason I read it was because we were on a long 14-hour road trip to South Dakota, and I was literally going to die from boredom, so we just listened to it in the car, and my husband had to stay, like, it was the only thing that kept him awake. So otherwise, I probably wouldn't have read it at all, ever. So it's been a long time since I've actually physically read a book and enjoyed it. I did read The Inmate the other day, and it was enough to get me into reading again, but this one, that was a standalone book, so this book in particular, it got me addicted to reading like a series again and getting addicted to the act of reading, because with The Inmate, yes, it got me into reading again, but it was kind of a one and done. It was with a plot that I was specifically interested in reading at the time, and I kind of like didn't need to read anymore. But for me, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sara J. Maas got me into the idea of reading again. Like, I'm actually actively looking for books, and I'm interested in reading more often and stuff like that. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. If you did, please give this video a like, and subscribe for more writing and reading videos every Monday. In the meantime, I have actually done a book review recently, which I read a book called The Inmate. It was a psychological thriller, my first psychological thriller, and I got so addicted, and I also was completely wrong about who is behind everything going on, and I can't believe I pegged it wrong. So click here if you want to watch my review about that book. It's a psychological thriller, so if you like those kind of books, or if you like books with epic twists in them that you will not see coming, then click here.